Game manager, I think they're going to lean heavy.
Radio Network.
Of the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and tonight we have got a great program lined up, just like usual. But first, we've got to do our same old, same old. I'm going to remind you all to join the Facebook group if you're a Facebooker. It's called Gia Scott's Dawn of Shades, and sign up for it. You get approved pretty quick, and then you get all the updates, programs, you get little posts from various guests that have appeared in the past, and sometimes ones that are going to be appearing in the future as well. You don't get spammed because it is now a closed group, and that was to put an end to the spam. We seem to be getting it for sunglasses. I guess it was a shades thing. Anyhow, that's why you have to request to join. You can't just automatically join. And if for some reason you are not approved within 24 hours, send me a message, because it means something's gone wrong with their little system, and I'll get it fixed for you. And then for the program tonight, just like always, you can send a question in via Twitter. I've got my Twitter feed up and running, and if you type in @Gia Scott, all one word, it will pop up on my little notifications screen, and your question will be bingo right there. Then if you want to do a little slightly more old-fashioned way, you can send it in via email. And that's Gia Scott, GIASCOTT, @exogenynetwork.com. And that's spelled EXOGENYNETWORK.com. I had to think a second. Got lost in those letters. exogenynetwork.com, and that will send it off to my email, which I also check. Now, you can post on the Facebook group page. However, I do not monitor that during the program. There's a limit how much I can stare at while I'm talking to. It's kind of like bubblegum and walking. It can be challenging at times. So, moving right on forward, tonight we're going to be talking about inventions. And inventions are wonderful things. That's how we make progress in terms of technology. Once upon a time, the wheel was invented by someone. Once upon a time, the computer chip was invented by someone. And with each invention, we hope that our lives become a little less complicated and a little bit more pleasant. And so inventions are really, really important to our progress as a society as a whole. Sometimes inventions are very simple things. Sometimes they are very complex things, and they vary a great deal. So we're going to talk about inventions, in particular one particular invention, which we're going to talk about later, of course. Can't tell you all of it right away. And we're going to be talking with an inventor who has joined us tonight. And we're also going to be talking about crowdfunding. Now, a lot of people may say, well, crowdfunding, why is that important? Crowdfunding is a way for you to really vote with your dollars directly, right away. Crowdfunded projects, and you can surf through them. The three biggest sites are Indiegogo, GoFundMe, and Kickstarter, all followed by .com. Those are the three biggest sites. There's other ones as well. You can surf through those, and you can find all kinds of projects. Some of them you may regard as frivolous. Some of them you may regard as very serious. Some are in terms of social improvement. Some of them are physical products. Some of them are a particular project that someone wants to do. Maybe it's to bring an object to market. Maybe it's for research and development. There's all sorts of things on there. And believe me, you can surf through just one site. You can spend a whole day looking at stuff. And most of it's super, super cool. So it's a way for you to say, this is important enough to me that I'm going to support it. And you can support it with as little as $1, so less than the price of a cup of coffee. That's all it takes. And how often do we really get, for average Joe citizen, how often do we really get a chance to make a difference in the products that reach market, the projects that are funded, the things that happen in our world that really pertain to us or that make us smile or make us passionate or happy or angry or whatever? So often we feel powerless in the world. Crowdfunding is a way to empower average Joe citizen. You don't have to be $1 million investor. You don't have to be a movie star with a bankroll that looks quite impressive with lots of zeros in it. None of those things are important, because you can support a project with as little as $1, and by sharing it with your friends too. So, and we're also going to be joined tonight by Gregory Miller, and many of you may know that he's my partner in crime, and he's going to stand in as sort of our crowdfunding expert for tonight as we talk some more about crowdfunding. So, without further ado, the first thing I'm going to do is have Gregory introduce himself to the audience.
Well, hi, everybody. If you're familiar with the United Public Radio Network, you've probably heard my voice on Saturday afternoons. I host a show from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Saturday called The Voice of the People. And it's going to be a little bit different for me because usually I'm the one that's doing the interviewing. So I guess tonight I get to be on the Dawn of Shades here on UPRN and be one of the interviewees. I hope that I'm able to shed a little bit of light on the subject. I'm going to let everybody in the audience know a little secret. The experts that I wanted to have come on the show with me as a panel guest were not available. They're actually being interviewed for a television station. So that being said, I'll give the show back to Gia so she can introduce our guest to everyone.
Well, our other guest tonight is who I've been posting on various websites and social media tonight as Drew the Inventor. So, Drew the Inventor, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I am Drew the Inventor. My name is Drew Hoskins, and I am the inventor of the Dispatch Angel.
Okay, now, Drew, we talked a little bit about this project earlier today, or not earlier today, yesterday. Without going in being specific to this particular thing, what it does yet, we'll get into that later. Let's start off this with, the very beginning. You have an idea, you come up with a solution for a problem, and that is your invention. Then you have to make it work. And now let's assume that you've gone through this. You had your idea, you have a problem, you found a solution, and you've come up with at least a rudimentary sort of prototype thing. Now you're ready to move on, and actually you're ready to patent it. What was the first thing that you did?
The first thing that I did was actually what they call a poor man's patent. And I jotted down the idea on a piece of paper, dated it, went to the post office, sent it to myself in a certified letter, and I actually had it notarized and then sent it to myself in a certified letter. And then once the certified letter arrived, I went ahead and put it in a manila envelope and had it notarized also.
Okay, so we did talk a little bit about that, and the so-called poor man's patent does not, in most states, protect you a great deal. You'd still have to go to court. It's not a searchable patent, which means that it's more likely to be infringed upon accidentally, and so forth and so on. Now, have you done anything towards the process of obtaining a standard, regular, recognized patent?
Yes, I have actually. I've been in contact with a company by the name of World Patent Incorporated, and the patent has been briefed and is and it is patent pending.
Okay. Now, Greg, I'm going to pull you in on this at this point. You want to tell us what a patent brief is and why it's important?
Well, basically, what Drew has done is he's gone the official step of having, it sounds like he also had a company that helped him do some research where they will go through the list of existing patents and find out whether or not what you're trying to say is, your idea or your improvement of an existing idea, whether or not anybody has filed a patent for it. That can be time-consuming if you don't know where to look or you're working a regular job. And so by having this brief filed, what you're doing is you're basically paying somebody to do the work where they also go through the same thing you'd go through if you did it all by yourself. And they go to the patent office, they do a search on it, and they use the same type of things that you would use on the Internet today looking for something. They use keywords, and then they actually have some cases had to go through some of the structural drawings and designs and everything that are also filed as part of this brief. And what the brief is doing is it's protecting an inventor like Drew's interests where, as he said, patent pending. That means that if it comes back through the search that somebody else has not put the same idea forward in the same manner in which he put the idea forward, then he will have the Patent Office, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, review it, and if there are no stumbling blocks, they will go ahead and they will approve it, which means that he either owns the idea or he owns the idea on the improvement of an existing idea. And it's very important to remember that you can have an idea to improve something that already exists, and you can get a patent for it. You don't have to, invent something completely from scratch. You can say, well, that'd be better if that thing worked like this, and you can go through the process and eventually have your own invention if that's the case.
Okay, that's interesting. Myself, I've never really, what I would say, invented something. Drew, were you looking for something to invent? Have you invented other things, whether or not you pursued them in terms of a patent or whatnot? Were you a kid that invented stuff along the way, or was this sort of out of the blue? Not
so whatsoever. I was not a big Lego kid, and it was kind of out of the blue. I was just sitting on the couch one Sunday morning drinking coffee with my wife, and a news story came on about a teen that was shot out in front of a store, and the idea just basically flowed from there.
In order for that to make sense, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your invention and what it's for?
Sure thing, no problem. The invention that I have came up with is more for the law enforcement side, but it also protects the civilian side also. With all the recent events with the unknown shootings, one officer being there, no witnesses to come forward or video evidence, I actually came up with an idea of once the gun is drawn from the officer's holster, there's a signal that automatically turns on the the microphone on the officer's shoulder to a direct line to dispatch. So dispatch is notified that his gun is drawn.
Okay. And that would provide some sort of record. I was a police dispatcher many, many moons ago, and at that point it was handwritten logs, but I'm sure they've advanced since then, at least in your larger departments. I did work in a fairly small department, and we did, even in the 80s, I guess. In the 80s, we did still have handwritten logs, and there weren't any in the area that had tapes yet. In fact, 911 didn't even exist yet. So, at least not in rural areas. It might have been in urban areas. So, I'm sure lots of things have changed since, I worked in law enforcement. And opening this audio log or audio link with dispatch, first of all, it keeps dispatch informed and would allow additional officers to be sent, as well as somebody else hears what's going on.
Exactly. And it also would hold the officer more accountable, for drawing his weapon. Make him actually think twice about the situation, like, is this necessary, or can I use a different tactic, pepper spray, taser, something like that. And, I myself have no background in law enforcement. It's just saddening to see all these people asking all these questions and not getting answers for the death of their loved ones.
This is true. And, even looking at it from a law enforcement perspective, protecting yourself is important for an officer as well. Not only protecting yourself from physical harm, but from legal ramifications. We've all known officers, whether we worked in law enforcement or not, who tended to be twitchy. We used to have a number of names for it. Danny Rooster syndrome for the little guys with a big attitude. All sorts of names that we would have for officers that did tend to get a little heavy-handed at times. And I never worked with anybody that shot anybody while I was on duty, at least, or that, I worked with regular. So, I didn't have experience in what that was like. But I do know that even drawing their weapon at that time in that state required a lot of paperwork. They had to fill out a report just for taking their gun out of the holster. Did they do it every time? I don't know. I wasn't there, where I was watching them. But, they were supposed to anyhow. This would provide a lot of protection for the officers. So you filed for this patent brief, and I'm assuming you had to pay a fee to this company that you hired, correct?
Correct. Yes, I did.
Okay, so you've done that part. Now, a lot of people don't realize that between the idea and the product comes a whole lot of other steps, most of which, just like the one step of hiring the company to start this patent process for you, requires money.
Correct.
And unless you're independently wealthy, it usually means you're going to be seeking funding somewhere.
Also correct.
And in your case, you opted for crowdfunding. What made you think that crowdfunding would be your best option?
Well, the reason I thought crowdfunding would be the best option is because this is a practical product that can be used in everyday life and wouldn't just benefit one person or a single group of people. This would benefit everybody. So I turned to crowdfunding thinking that, I get the word out here, people will see this, and, they'll think it's a great idea, that, this is 5 years too late, maybe it needs to be produced faster, but, sadly that has not been my go at it. It actually has not really progressed that well for me. Okay, now I looked at the crowdfunding project, okay, and so far you've not gotten a great deal of support. And part of it was some issues that we talked about. That crowdfunding isn't as simple as having a really important or meaningful or, potentially high earning or whatever kind of product or program. Sometimes it's about the packaging. We've all been told, don't judge a book by its cover. But guess what? When we go into the bookstore, what do? We judge a book by its cover. And the same thing is true with crowdfunding. There's certain elements that go with crowdfunding and successful projects. How much research did you put into setting up your campaign before you actually set it up? Myself, I've researched a couple different websites, Kickstarter, and then the one that I'm on, GoFundMe, and there was another one, but I don't remember the name offhand. And I went with GoFundMe because Kickstarter was more of a video thing, and still at the time, I have not produced a video, didn't have a video, and I kind of wanted to get the word out there. So it was easier for me to go with that direction than to go with Kickstarter because of the video aspect. Now looking back at it, after having this out there, I see that a lot of people don't want to read, and I've had quite a bit of people ask me if there's a video.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things, because I've done a fair amount we actually did a program some months ago about crowdfunding, and I'd also done some research on crowdfunding projects, the differences between funded projects and unfunded projects. And I have never seen, and this is sad, I have never seen a funded project that did not include a video. Now, I could be wrong. I have never seen one, though. And, you know, so that's an important thing that maybe you need to rectify. And talking with people before, sometimes when you start a campaign, maybe prematurely or maybe not quite as well prepared as you should have been, it can be either, you know, the section taken is remedial action, adding the video, doing the promotions and whatnot, or you could start over and do it again. What do you think is usually the best route, Greg?
Well, I think, honestly, Drew is probably going to have an influx of people who are going to be interested, and if not after appearing on the show, probably not too much difficulty in approaching the audiovisual department at a local community college or high school and actually put together a hypothetical situation with this invention, and I look forward to seeing that from him. I tend to agree with the video aspect of it, that the crowdfunding, you know, people really kind of need to see the idea in action. It's not that everybody's illiterate, it's just that it catches people's attention and puts the idea across in a more immediate manner.
I see. And after having those questions asked about if I had a video or not, I've actually contacted a buddy of mine who is at one of the local colleges who is in the audiovisual club, and we're scheduled to shoot a video later this week, probably about a 5-10 minute video.
And that's, you know, usually, Drew, that's all it takes, because people also have this short attention span when it comes to the things on YouTube. I've seen a couple of the crowdfunding videos. I'll be honest with the audience as well. I liked the product. I just thought that their video presentation on it was overkill. To be quite honest, these recent events outside in St. Louis, in particular, are their own video testament to what goes wrong and what your invention is going to hopefully help correct.
And that's what I'm trying to help correct, because it's not just that happened in St. Louis. It happened here in my home state of Ohio. I'm actually centered between Dayton and Cincinnati. So the week of what happened in St. Louis, actually there was a shooting similar to that in a Walmart store up here in Beaver Creek, Ohio. And then the idea where I got the idea for the invention was in Cincinnati. So it's globally, actually. I mean, it's not just localized to one area, and that's why I believe it would be a great invention to get out there and get going.
Yeah, I think the project definitely has a lot of merit, which, of course, is why, I was talking to Drew about him coming on the program to talk about it, because of the fact that it protects all parties. It, first of all, it's going to make the officer think twice. Secondly, it's going to give him at least an audio witness to the event. And thirdly, because of the fact that there's a witness and the officer is going to think twice about drawing the weapon to begin with, it offers a level of protection to the public. And final, if things do go wrong, there's a record of it. And that's sad but true. Things do go wrong.
And the other thing you can add to that, too, is there's a lot of people out there pushing the lapel cams or the badge cameras. Those are great in theory. There's a couple flaws I've seen with them, and I really don't want to go into it because I kind of coming up with an idea to fix it also. But along with those, my invention could also coincide with the recorded video that they have. And it could place, this is when it happened. Because if I'm not mistaken, those cameras run constantly. I don't know what the battery life is on them or not, or, how they're timestamped. I do know that they are not a live feed like my product would be.
Right. Yeah, well, I don't know exactly their technical aspects or how they work. And, I know that not all departments have them. Small departments often do not have that kind of equipment, simply because if you're dealing with a total of 12 officers, you probably don't have a budget to even buy one camera, let alone one for each officer that's on duty.
Correct.
So, they don't have it. This sounds like it would be a much less expensive item to add to their arsenal of equipment for the officers. It provides a lot of information to dispatch, including in those cases where an officer ultimately is injured or killed in the line of duty, who may have drawn his weapon or had his weapon pulled out of the holster by someone else. And there have been cases where those things have happened. And there would be an audio record of that as well. Dispatch wouldn't have to wait until someone else happened on the scene to call them.
Exactly, and if he was in a surprise situation where he had to draw his weapon fast, they have to hold their weapon with both hands. How is he going to hit the button on his walkie-talkie on his shoulder to call for backup if he's alone? This would eliminate that need.
Yeah, it is actually, I can see an immense amount of potential, an immense number of ways to sell it to various departments. So, okay, when you came up with the amount that you were trying to get crowdfunded, what is this initial amount that you were trying to get supposed to fund?
Actually, the whole project. I was just trying to get enough to, I just threw a number out there, basically. And I was trying to see if I could get enough to keep the ball rolling on the project to where it don't stop, to where it could keep going. Did I expect to get that much? No. Did I expect to get what I have? No, I actually expected to get more than what I have already. So, but it's just a guesstimate.
Now, Drew, would you like to give out the address, since it's a web page, for your GoFundMe?
Yeah, maybe if I can find my pad here.
While we're waiting for Drew to pick up that information off of his device, there are several different options with the crowdfunding. And one of the things with GoFundMe in particular, and also I'll mention the other couple of sites, Kickstarter, which Drew said was video-centric. There's also Indiegogo. And one of the differences between this and regular funding, where you go find somebody to back your project, is that the crowdfunding is technically, at this point in time, considered a gift from the people who are your donors when you're doing your fundraising activity. So as the person receiving the funding to go forward with the project, you're also not liable for taxation and other things under these types of crowdfunding with these websites. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Drew picked that particular website.
That actually is true. I did find the website here. It's GoFundMe.com, and it's /dispatch-angel.
Right.
And I also have a Facebook page also. It's just Dispatch Angel.
All right, folks. So if you're on Facebook while you're listening to the show, look up Dispatch Angel, like the page. You can communicate back and forth there with Drew. Drew, have you gotten a lot of feedback from Facebook in particular with this? I know that you probably will have a post up there, and then you'll have 37 people all making comments about the recent events in your comment section as well.
Actually, the Facebook page is not that old, and really when I post the updates and everything, I don't get that many people looking at it or even I get more tweets or more favorites and likes on Twitter when the link is posted on there than I have on Facebook.
Okay, so you're definitely working at trying to get the word out, because social media happens to be a huge part of most people's lives these days.
It's in most people's pockets 24/7.
I think I happen to be an exception. I don't use it on the phone. I only use it on a laptop. I don't even use it on my Kindle.
I do have the guilty pleasure of the phone. Sometimes my wife thinks it's glued to my hand.
Yeah, well, I have a smartphone, but I actually don't use 90% of the features. And I really don't use it to surf on the internet or use Facebook or Twitter or any of that. Mostly because if I'm at home, why peer at a teeny tiny screen? And if I'm not at home, I'm busy. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. As far as the smartphone goes, I'm obviously not a devout user. So I know from looking at your Facebook page that it's fairly recent. How long have you been using Twitter?
Probably 3 weeks.
Okay, and before all this started, had you been a long-term user of computers and internet?
Oh, yeah, I've been real familiar with computer and internet. Used to have, a personal Facebook page a long time ago, and I never really used that one much, so I just deleted it. And, like I said, 2 years ago I had this idea, and I went to a couple different people on the, becoming an investor with me or partnering with me on this idea, and got nowhere. So when I started rehashing the idea, I figured, it's time to go get my name out there, because where I live at is not that big of a town, so there's not that many people, and I figured that's the way to go, social media. The buddy of mine that's actually going to help me with the video for my GoFundMe page, he is the one that turned me on to go to Twitter. He's like, get it out there, at least do the crowdfundme. He actually led me to Kickstarter, and me and him went back and forth with the GoFundMe, and like Greg said, it's a donation. And more people are up to donate than to get taxed.
Yeah, Drew, and you bring up a really good point. There's a lot of people that might be familiar with it in a negative aspect, where there have been a couple of projects that have been financed through people making Kickstarter donations, and then the company behind it that had the invention ended up selling their rights to the invention to like a huge corporation, something like Yahoo.com or Google or somebody like that would end up buying whatever it was that the people had on Kickstarter. And there seems to be this general public consensus that one of the reasons that you are funding somebody on Kickstarter, per se, is because it's completely independent, and they didn't really expect these people to turn around and then sell the thing that they had created off to what other people would consider a huge, corporate conglomerate structure. But the people that were behind putting the product together looked at it and said, well, that's going to be the best way to get the product out for public use, and that's ultimately what I was doing when I went with Kickstarter. And the climate with GoFundMe being more donation-based, the only thing I could personally see that you might have a little bit of a problem with the way GoFundMe runs things is being able to give people a reward. And a lot of campaigns on GoFundMe in particular, people will be listed as an executive producer on a film, or they will end up getting an advanced screening of the movie if they're participating in funding something like that. In some cases, they'll receive an item like whatever is being made, say it's a new children's toy or anything like that. Were you able to take into consideration any kind of a reward structure with your GoFundMe part of the project, other than listing people as a contributor and having them be able to say, hey, look, I helped put this out there to increase public safety? Have you come up with any kind of product like reward type of thing, like even giving away a coffee cup or a hat, or did you ultimately have to decide against that? Because just generalizing myself, I don't think I could come up with a coffee cup or a hat that would promote the particular idea for me to be able to give it away as a GoFundMe reward per se.
Yeah, I actually kicked around the idea of having a goal on there, and I have one on there, and the goal is the first person to donate $5,000 would become a 10% shareholder in the company, the product itself. And I actually have the paperwork for the joint venture agreement and everything on that drawn up. Other than that, there's no reward. Other than you get rewarded by becoming a part of a great invention that would save countless lives.
All right, and there happens to be the answer that I sort of expected. I'm glad to hear that you do have that option up there for anybody that's listening that might be interested in being the joint venture partner on Drew's invention. You know, Drew, you said that you started this process a couple of years ago, too. I would imagine that you probably looked around for angel investors or startup funding or business funding. Can you tell everybody a little bit about what the downfall of that was that eventually led you to considering GoFundMe as an option?
The downfall to the angel investors was that I looked for. A lot of them gave me the runaround. You know, they wanted to hear my idea, but at the time I didn't want to divulge so much information, and it was kind of hard to pitch it to them at that stage. And then a couple other ones that I spoke with, you know, one of them actually did help me out and gave me the idea, you know, to go ahead with the poor man's patent just for now at that time. But other than that, going for, you know, looking for grants, actually I I've actually been in contact, I sent a couple emails to the governor of Ohio, John Kasich, who sent me back an automated reply saying that it's been my request was forwarded to the Ohio Department of, I can't even remember what, Civil Services or something like that. But other than that, the angel investors or, you know, going to a bank did not help me out whatsoever, and it was kind of a waste of time.
Oh, there you go, folks. It makes it, you know, look like it's not always a lost cause, but it shows how difficult it is to talk with people, because if you're not on Shark Tank or one of these other television programs that has been out in the last 10 years, you really are basically one person in the kayak or the canoe with one paddle, and you could about picture yourself going in a continuous circle instead of trying to get to the other end of the pond. And usually the angel investors are looking for something that's, you know, anywhere probably from $100,000 to $1 million for somebody to start up a product that is going to be used in some industrial capacity. I know it sounds kind of, you know, wrong to describe the industry that way, but what they're usually looking for as an angel investor is that you're going to eventually create jobs from this. And Drew, if you were to tell somebody that was listening that was, you know, a multi-billionaire, off the top of your head, how many people do you think you would be able to put to work producing your invention inside the first 2 years? Inside
of 20 to 30. Depending on the demand for the product.
One question I really had was, $50,000 to a lot of us sounds like a whole lot of money. But when you really start calculating how much it would cost to have this product in production, mailing it out to police departments across the continent, that's a drop in the bucket, I suspect. I think you may have, you know, to actually get it clear up to the point of production, you may have underestimated and might need to reevaluate how far you'll actually get. You know, one of the things that businesses all have to have when they're going to the bank, angel investors, you know, anybody that's going to invest in them, they start off with a business plan. And that's, I think, one thing you need to sit down and do for yourself is a business plan. There's a number of templates. If you use Microsoft Word, there's a number of templates that you can download right directly from Microsoft that tell you actually what to fill in. And even if it's not 100% what a bank would demand of you, it's at least going to sort of give you a blueprint for what you need to, what kinds of information you are going to need to get for yourself. Okay. Things like how much it's actually going to cost you to, after you get your patent, you know, how much research and development are you going to have to have? Are you going to have to test this object before you start selling it to police departments? Do you need to take a prototype and give away, you know, a dozen of them for police departments to trial before you can say, okay, it's ready for production? You know, these are all kinds of questions that, as the owner of the patent and the chief executive officer, you are going to be ultimately responsible for answering.
Okay, I understand that.
You know, and a lot of times, a lot of us don't realize that there's such a huge mountain to climb. It's literally like Mount Everest between the great idea and the great idea in the hands of the world. And there's a long journey in between, and you're still in the early stages of it. You know, and crowdfunding is really important part of that, because there again, anybody who's gone to the bank for a loan, whether it's to buy a house, a car, whatever they've gone to the bank for a loan for, complicate it by tenfold if you're trying to start up a company, because finding money to start a business is difficult, and it becomes even more complex and impossible if you're trying to fund a new product like Drew is trying to do. Now, Greg, did you have anything to say?
Well, I'm thinking, you know, more along the lines of, once Drew has gone through the production of producing his video, taking a second look, and you know, not to say that there's anything wrong with GoFundMe, because it is a gifting platform. But once you have the video out there, it's also going to, you know, be a more useful tool in your hands to be able to go back to the other sites, because you can run concurrent funding campaigns on Indiegogo.com or Kickstarter, and you can actually hopefully it will end up with your own website dedicated to it, to show people exactly where they are in the tote board, Drew. It's kind of like running a telethon. Okay. And yeah. You know, and so
even adding a blog talking about the process, you know, where he's at for regular updates, would
see, that was my next step. I was thinking about was actually starting a blog for that purpose.
And I think a suggestion that I would make is maybe breaking this down into steps might make it a little bit easier for you to find the funding. Like you know, maybe finding the funding to finish the patent process would be a much smaller, more easily achievable chunk. You know, to just look for that amount of money and do this maybe in baby steps. It successfully complete one small baby step, then move on to another one. And with your business plan, you could actually outline what kinds of steps you'd be going through, so that you'd be much better prepared when you start looking at your crowdfunding. In addition, there's a lot of preparatory work before most people launch their successful crowdfunding campaigns. They do a lot of pre-launch publicity, things like, you know, once you've got your patent, then you will be free to, you know, go on Good Morning America and show a prototype and explain, you know, maybe do a little skit showing how it would work. in your local newspaper, other newspapers, magazines, a lot of media outlets as a result of recent events. And it's been, for the past year, we've seen continual media presentation of overzealous police officers. And
Correct.
many of them have been terminated, if not prosecuted, for their behavior. So there's going to be an equal number that are potentially interested in featuring you and your product before it's even ready for launch.
Okay.
As a potential thing. So it would increase the interest while you're taking the baby steps.
Well, Drew, I really admire the fact that you started this process off, a couple of years ago, and you stuck to it, because that's one thing to tell everybody in the audience that, over the course of time, we will likely have you back on with Gia talking about all of this stuff. That I'm not going to go crazy and predict this huge media tour, but usually when stuff like that happens to people, they're not expecting it.
Okay.
And we've talked to a lot of book authors and people that said, I didn't realize that once I started doing this, I ended up doing 12 or 24 months of appearances along with the rest of the work, and in some of the authors' cases, it sort of interrupted the flow of what they're working on. I don't see you as having a problem with being able to step away from the production end of this item once you have it up and running, and being able to go out and promote it as the inventor. So I'm glad that you decided to stick with it. What I'm really concerned about is that you and the rest of us turn on our news and we see these situations that your invention would help to avoid.
Exactly. And, it could turn on the TV later tonight, and there's one that's already happened, and this could have stopped it.
Yeah, so I agree that it's very important to get this product into the hands of the public as soon as possible. And in order for that to happen, you really do have to find the funding to finish the patent process, put it in production, do the necessary testing, because, I'm sure it's going to have some field testing before it actually is marketed directly to law enforcement all over the world, actually. Yeah. So, you're going to have to make some prototypes that are actually given to a police department, whichever police department you can con into adopting your idea free of charge in return for testing it. And I'm sure, there's enough police departments in this nation that you'll be able to find them. But it does offer, a whole lot of protection, on both sides of the coin, whether you're a member of the public or you are the officer wearing the device. Now, how big do you, I know that police officers, first of all, that utility belt, even without a gun, weighs a small ton. I'm thinking 15 to 20 pounds average. Well, it might be a little less now. Radios are smaller. But it used to be they were running 15, 20 pounds.
Yeah.
So, they're very, very heavy already. Then they're wearing that bulletproof vest underneath their uniform. So it's T-shirt, bulletproof vest, and their uniform shirt. That is very hot as well as heavy and, sort of restrictive. You can't, you don't feel like you have the same kind of freedom of movement when you've got it all on. All right, so you're wearing all this gear. You've got your badge, you've got your radio, your utility belt. You add the gun, the hat, and whatever else your department sticks on you. There's a lot of crap. And how big do you anticipate this device being when the officer's actually wearing it?
Oh, the device itself, it will actually be mounted into the holster of the gun on each side. If any weight is added, it'd probably be a pound, maybe 2.
A pound or 2. That's still a substantial amount. Physically, What do you anticipate it measuring in terms of dimensions?
Oh, probably about the size of a nickel, maybe a quarter for the holster, and then the electronic connections would run between the stitchings of the leather belt to the actual radio.
Okay, all right. Probably a pound is you're really overestimating. This is probably going to be a few ounces.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's not very physically big, and it probably would not be even that noticeable to the public.
No.
The public may not even be aware that they're wearing it.
No, and that's another thing about my design is it's supposed to look just like a regular duty belt. It won't have any bulging out or wires that's showing anywhere. The only thing you might see, it'll look like a button on the side of their holster where their gun is, but it'll...
Now, another question, with most departments, the utility belt is actually purchased by the officer. It's not supplied by the department. Would this device be retrofitted to utility belts, or would they have to buy a special holster and utility belt where it's built in?
No, it could be retrofitted.
Okay, all right. All right, we're having a little bit of trouble finding your GoFundMe page. You want to give us the address again?
Yeah, it's GoFundMe.com, and I'm sorry, I said backslash before. It's / dispatch, and there's a dash angel.
Dispatch dash angel. That's very important for those of you who are looking for his GoFundMe page. Make sure you get that dash in there, because if you don't, you won't find it. Dispatch angel. Okay. Get that page brought up so I can talk directly about the page itself in front of me. With it in front of me. And let's see. On Twitter, what is your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is at GTDrew281. I'm sorry, it's at DrewGT281.
Yeah, DREW, G as in George, T as in Tom, 281.
Correct.
Okay, let's see. Didn't have it. It's capital D, dispatch dash angel. Make sure you get that capital D in there. It's apparently GoFundMe is really particular.
I see that now.
Yeah, capital D, dispatch dash angel. Okay. Now, when you look at there, you see a photograph of a actual utility belt with a gun, with the radio on, and so forth and so on. And like I said, these are usually purchased by the officers. They may get an allowance from the department they work for to help pay for their uniforms, utility belts, boots, etc., all the gear that they wear. Having worked in law enforcement, the allowance is usually far less than what you actually spend on your gear. And so being able to retrofit a utility belt and holster is often going to be very important for these officers. Another thing a lot of people don't usually think about is that most officers in most locales are not really well paid. It's not a high-paying position, especially as a patrolman. Maybe the pay is a little bit higher as you progress through the ranks, but most officers don't. Progress through the ranks for whatever reason. Maybe they just decide to leave and go to another career. I've known a number of officers that have become lawyers or psychiatrists. That seems to be the two most common things that I know of officers going on to do instead of. Sometimes they become firemen and so forth and so on. But, the deal is that by protecting their careers while they're a police officer, it allows them to have options when they do or if they do decide to leave law enforcement and go to another career. You just have a brief paragraph there about it and a couple of photographs. Like I said, adding a video explaining exactly what it does, it helps people a great deal. Did you have anybody help you write up and set up your GoFundMe page?
No, everything is strictly me. I have no help other than the moral support from my wife and my family. Everything else I've done on my own accord.
Uh-huh. So you have invested a great deal of your own time and energy and some of your own money in it already. And, that goes a long ways towards, convincing people that they should support this too. The whole thing is that so far you only had one donation. That's not a real good success rate. A lot of projects are funded much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of depressing to see that your own project isn't getting funded. But again, there's something to be said about that. Don't judge a book by the cover, but in fact, we all do. By sprucing up your page, I think a lot can be said for improving. Now, how much longer is your campaign running? I
don't believe it has an end date.
It does not have an end date. Okay. All right, and you started it towards the end of July, and it's been shared over 1,000 times on Twitter and on Facebook. And, if you're listening tonight, folks, definitely go to www.gofundme.com/D dispatch -angel. Don't forget that capital and that dash.
Yeah.
That's really important. Then you will see the page that we're talking about and the project that we are talking about. And you say right there, one sheriff's department is asking for $8 million for cameras that can only record what happens, and it's not live feed. And the live feed directly to dispatch, especially for these smaller departments, can be a critical thing. Or any officer that, Highway Patrol, County Sheriff's Department, sometimes these officers are in the boondocks and don't have ready access to someone happen to cruise by. And your Twitter nickname again is @DrewGT281.
Correct.
Okay, and that's DREWGT281. And then you can follow Drew right on Twitter, where he happens to chit-chat a lot, and he is willing to tell you all sorts of things if you want to connect with him there. Find out what he's got going on with it, find out what his updates are, and so forth and so on. To get your patent finished would be a really huge asset. But, you know what? It is time for us to take a break, folks. So, while we are away from your computer, do go take a look at Drew's GoFundMe page. If you use Twitter, link up to him. If you use Facebook, you can get his Dispatch Angel page over there, too. Just search for Dispatch Angel. All right, and with that, we'll be right back with more with our guests, Drew the Inventor and Gregory Miller, as soon as our lovely producer takes us away with some music of some sort. And maybe he won't. Sometimes our producer, I think, goes to sleep. And then he doesn't take us away on break. And today it looks like he's gone to sleep. So I guess we will keep talking until he wakes up. He must be feeling a need for a nap. getting to be older, you know. So, Drew, in terms of your next step, that was finishing the patent, correct?
Correct.
Okay, then what is the step that you're going to take next after that?
That would be the research and development on, like you mentioned earlier, the testing of the product, along with the prototype, finishing up the prototype of this. And then after that, also included in that is the marketing.
Okay, so your initial research and development would be like, say, making up one and playing cops and robbers with a buddy in the backyard, right?
Basically,
I'm being somewhat facetious here, but essentially, that's what you're going to be. You're going to be pretending at first.
Exactly.
It won't be actually on an officer yet when you initially start it off. Will this work with any radio, or will it require a particular model or brand or whatever?
No, it should work with any radio. From my research that I've done on my own, I've found that basically the innards of the radios are the same. So it is able to adapt to whatever radio the officer does carry.
Okay, because I do know that at least this used to be true. Small departments often had a mixed bag of radios. They might have one that was 5 years old and one that was 10 years old and 3 that were 3 years old and 1 that was new. So they might have, every radio might be a different make and model. Sometimes, each handle of, or each, they might have 3 of each kind, each age and whatnot. So there would be some variation. And these are not owned by the officer, so when they come on duty, they would be picking up a radio. In some cases, they're assigned to the officer. But yeah, our producer has returned, so we're going to leave everybody wondering about what kind of radios their police department has. And we're going to go ahead and take our break now, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. So go check out that GoFundMe page, check out Twitter, check out Facebook. To the Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and tonight we are talking about inventions, patents, and crowdfunding, as well as some law enforcement stuff. So I have in the queue with me in our digital studio, I have Gregory Miller, and I have Drew the Inventor. Now, Drew, before we get started, I want you to tell everybody once again where they can find your GoFundMe page and how they can link up with you on Facebook and Twitter.
You can link up with me on Twitter at DREWGT281. That's Drew GT281. You can also find me on Facebook at Dispatch Angel, or you can also go to my GoFundMe page, which is www.gofundme.com/D for Dispatch /Angel.
Actually, you have no microphone.
Oh. So. /dash Angel. If you put in a slash, it'll really confuse the computers. I forgot I had the microphone on mute. Since Greg and I happen to be in the same physical proximity, in order to keep our mic from picking up each other, we tend to mute them when we're not actually talking, which can get complicated since I'm not used to doing that, and I'm like, got buttons to push, buttons everywhere. And that's one of the things your little invention does. It eliminates the need to push buttons. If I can get confused with my own microphone sitting in a studio, imagine what it's like when things are going terribly wrong, because anytime an officer has to draw their gun, it's not a good day. Most officers go their entire career and never shoot their weapon. So keep that in mind. A lot of times we want to think about police officers are all bad guys, especially in today's political climate, being accused of everything under the sun. Most of them are not. Most of them are actually servants with the idea of public servanthood, I guess you'd say. They're there to serve the public. They're there to preserve the peace. And, they really don't go around shooting people. I've known many, many police officers that never ever shot anybody. My own father was a police officer for a while when I was a baby, I guess. But, the thing is that a lot of officers, they never draw their weapon, let alone shoot anybody. And especially in your smaller towns, okay? Life can be pretty peaceful in a small town. And at the same time, it can go very badly very quickly. The fewer things that you've got to think about doing when things are going badly. Now, anybody who's ever worked in law enforcement in any capacity, whether, it was in dispatch, whether it was in a jail, prisons, whether it was on the streets, wherever you were at, when things go bad, if you've got buttons to push, flags to wave, et cetera, it's hard to remember to hit everything in the order that you're supposed to be doing it, even though these may all be buttons that you push 100 times a day for other reasons. And I'm just using button pushing sort of figuratively here, because there's a lot more involved than pushing a button. But anyhow, the fewer things that you've got to remember, the better. And, this one right here, anytime an officer is drawing his weapon, he's usually going to be calling for backup. And he doesn't have to push the button and say, send backup now. He knows when he pulls that gun out of the holster, he can simply say it, and his microphone is going to pick it up. It eliminates one step for officers, because we've all also seen the cases where an officer was killed in the line of duty for whatever reason, by whatever method. And none of us like to see that either. So, I really do think this is a wonderful project. So go check out GoFundMe.com/D dispatch-angel and take a look at his page there, which, like I said, it's kind of bare bones, okay? I will be the first one to say that it's pretty bare bones as far as what he's got up there, but the project has a lot of merit, has a lot of thought put into it, and it's been in the works for 2 years already. So this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment, knee-jerk reaction to what happened in St. Louis, a month ago. It isn't that sort of a thing. This is a project that has been in the works far longer than that, for much the same reasons. Now, Drew, what you got anything to say at this point?
No, other than I look forward to all of the followers and hope that I get more support for my idea.
Yeah, we're going to have to kick around some ideas now about how to make your crowdfunding project more appealing. Now, one of the things that in the process of even doing the previous radio shows about crowdfunding that I did was research into both successful and unsuccessful crowdfunding campaigns. And like I said earlier, one of the keys was it's got to have a video. And you're already working on that particular deficit, I guess we'll call it. Greg, you got some other ideas for things that, make the difference between successful versus not successful programs?
Well, I don't want to leave the audience, Gia, with the opinion that everything depends on them having a video. It happens to be one of those things. What is most important in the case with Drew is going to be not the avalanche that could occur with getting the initial seed funding or, the startup money, however people want to use. There are 100 different ways of describing that. But where his plan is as to when the funding comes in, because I've actually seen, and not to take away from Drew's invention for a moment, but I've actually seen where people have prospective performing careers. They have done a video using their laptop, singing in their apartment in New York City. They went on to Kickstarter, and they ended up with $10,000 that they needed to do a demo for a record company within 24 hours. So we're going to say that, yes, the potential for Drew to hit the funding goal that he has up with GoFundMe is definitely there. It's a matter of creating public awareness. And then when you get past the public awareness and the need for this thing, and knowing who you're going to go to, where you're going to put the prototypes and everything together, I'm sure, Drew, that's something that you've already, exactly where you're going to go and how you're going to get that done. And then being able to engage departments around you and talk with your local lawmakers, your local sheriff's offices, your local police departments. You're going to probably spend more time than you ever thought making presentations with this and wondering what's wrong with some of these people, that they don't just see the immediate benefit of this. And we already went through it and picked up $50,000 in seed money. So that action plan is important, Gia and Drew, and it's not. And we're not saying Drew doesn't have a plan. He's been working on this for 2 years, right, Drew?
Correct, that is.
So we're not saying Drew has no money. Drew wants you to fund this. This is a really good idea. This is actually going to be something that's going to save people's lives. So in the court of public opinion and public relations, it is not a nightmare for the people that are going to look at it and say, ooh, I want to help with that. It's going to end up actually being probably more of a nightmare for its creator than it's going to be, I know it's going to be considered worthwhile, and then you will probably, want to have your wife enshrined for her level of patience. She's going to end up having put up with long hours and you putting, even more into this, and it's still probably going to be some period of time before you actually end up seeing it instituted on a national level. But I think it's one of those things, Drew, where, as they say, it's an idea whose time has not only come, its time was a couple of years in the past.
Correct, and I believe that statement.
And, when we were talking earlier about, you need a business plan, this is actually formalizing the plan and putting it in a coherent form that is coherent to a prospective lender, but it also gives you a concrete thing to refer to. It's not saying that Drew has no plan at all. That wasn't what I meant earlier when I was talking about the business plan. The business plan is actually, he's formalizing the blueprint of where he's going to go, what order he's going to do it in, and he can even lay out in that his own time frames. Essentially setting deadlines. Like, Drew, you were talking about setting up a blog, a website, building, your initial prototype for testing at home with your, with friends and family and whatnot, as well as reaching out for input from local police departments. What kinds of time frames do you think you'd be setting for yourself in those particular things? What kinds of goal dates to have those pieces in place? You already set a goal for your video on when you're going to do that. So, these other pieces that you've decided are important things that you need to add to your package, what kind of a time frame are you looking at for those?
Now that Greg told me, contact the local sheriff's department and go, get it implemented with them, I'm actually going to try to contact the sheriff's department in my local municipality tomorrow. And along with that, I've already sent an email to the mayor of the city I live in also to speak with him on the idea. So I'm not dragging my feet on this idea for the sake of, I don't want to really work on it. The only reason that the project hasn't went off without a hitch is the funding itself. And whenever the funding does come through, there will be no delay on anything. It will all be done.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that it's a case of hurry up and wait in terms of, things like you start the patent process. You're kind of in a state of limbo, until that brief is filed and so forth and so on. And even now there's a limit to how much you can actually devote to it until you know that, yes, I can in fact file for a patent. One of the things I would suggest is, in addition to the things that you've already got, sort of blueprinted out and planned for the immediate future, is get your blog started by sort of like the end of the week. For those who are not familiar with blogging, there's a number of sites that you don't have to buy web space or pay for anything. You can actually set up a free blog. Now, there are terms of service that limit what you can do with those. But for dissemination of information about a project, as long as you're not soliciting for donations right on those on your blog, you shouldn't have any problem. I mean, WordPress, Blogger, Greg, what's some other websites that do the blogs free?
Well, you hit on the two big ones there, but pretty much also you hit on the big point, which is read the terms of service. On these types of things, there are 100 different places where you can go set up a website. I would recommend Weebly, WEEBLY.com. It's not a commercial endorsement by us or the radio station or Drew. And I would also recommend Wix.com, especially if you're setting up something that's for a business. And that's something that you can step into. You can post your blog there. You will still continue, if you're in the position someone like Drew is in, conducting your search for your donors through the GoFundMe platform. You can put a link, a referral back to them on there. You're not violating their terms of service. But pay attention to all that stuff, folks, because when you just click on something and it says, I agree, you should know what you're agreeing to. So you might want to check those out if you're also in the same boat that Drew's in, and you're looking at a way of not only using something like GoFundMe or Indiegogo or Kickstarter. Look at the terms of service for the free website platforms that are out there for you too. Also, you have to look at the terms of service, especially on a platform like WordPress.com. You'll get all of the free blog posting and everything you want. You just can't host advertising on that. And that's very important. Some people, they end up getting an email after they've started a somewhat successful WordPress or Blogger blog, Drew and Gia, and what happens is they'll get solicited by this company. The company will say, well, advertise these football tickets for the Oklahoma State football game on your blog. Well, they go right ahead and they think, wow, I'm going to make like a couple $100, and they paste that in there. Well, Blogger or WordPress or whoever comes along and says, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. You just violated your terms of service. Now, everything you were writing about for 3 months with your daily blog updates is gone because you violated the terms of service, and that's why you don't want to violate those.
And I wouldn't necessarily, in the case of your dispatch angel, recommend daily blogging. First of all, you bore people to death. I mean,
correct.
The fact of the matter is, this isn't something dramatic and glamorous and exciting. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. So, in something like this, you would blog once a week is sort of like the industry standard minimum. And in addition, you might post additional posts when something dramatic does happen, because there are those dramatic moments, that hurry up and wait, and then boom, something wonderful does happen. And then you might want to add an additional post, or wait for your weekly. There again, that would depend on how important you really felt it was to reach whatever milestone. I would also recommend, a lot of people don't use it as much. I don't use it as much as I used to, and that's probably negligent on my part, is Google+. And that's another free social media platform. There again, it's same as, only different. I love that saying. Facebook, it's very similar to Facebook in terms of you're not restricted to the size of posts. You can put on links, you can add photographs, and so forth and so on. Many more characters than Twitter. As anyone who knows Twitter knows, you're restricted as to the number of characters. So for people who tend to be like me and often go on maximum verbosity, Twitter can be kind of inhibiting. So I actually play with Twitter sometimes in the middle of the night when I have insomnia to see what I can say, what kind of a sentence can I write that'll fit, just for fun and games. So if you follow me on Twitter, you might get some strange things in the wee hours. But besides stuff on Dispatch Angel, do you tweet about other things, Drew?
The only other thing I tweeted about recently was every Simpsons Ever marathon. Me and the kids, they had before their school started, had a couple days off, and we sat around and watched The Simpsons. Other than that, no. I like old cars, and that's about it.
For some reason, I kind of suspected that from the GT stuck after your name.
Yeah, I'm a big Mustang fan.
Yeah. I'm the daughter of a Ford dealer, so, I did recognize the GT thing. I grew up driving lots of different cars. There's some things to be said about doing that when you're learning to drive, because to this day, I can climb in a car I've never driven before. By the time I step on the brakes the first time, I'm ready to rock and roll in it. Doesn't take me long to adapt. Other people say, oh, it's so hard. I drive so-and-so's car. For me, I often am changing vehicles because my daughter recently has lost her vision, or most of it, and can't drive, so I may climb in their car or their truck and drive that. And we have two vehicles here at home, and they're very different to drive. And I don't drive the van. I have to admit I don't drive that very often, mostly because of visibility issues. I happen to be disabled. I cannot turn my head real well. And
I thought you were going to say so people don't see you.
No, I can't see them. The minivan has a lot of blind spots, and you practically got to do the thing where you spin your head around like an owl in order to see.
Yeah.
And that makes it really difficult for somebody like me. In addition, my injury has left me with my right arm not working. The doors are physically hard for me to manage. So, outside of the front passenger and driver's doors, I really can't operate the other doors. So, I don't like to drive it anymore. I used to love that van, but I don't anymore. I usually drive our other vehicle. And it's also physically more comfortable because it's a lot newer. The minivan is old enough to vote, I think, now, or close. At least in some states.
I like mine where they can get their AARP card.
Well, I used to drive a vehicle that had been manufactured in the 80s. Not quite old enough for its AARP card. And it was an old pickup truck. And I loved it, despite the fact that it was kind of an odd vehicle for a woman living in New Orleans at the time. But I did. It didn't have air conditioning anymore. It had long since quit working, and I had not had it redone because it needed the whole thing replaced. And that was, very expensive. So I hadn't done that. And then one day I went to leave home, and when I stepped on the gas, it sounded like it was chewing up tin cats, and they were yowling. That's not a good sound. And I had a couple of mechanics that worked on the truck for me, one on each side of where I worked. Very convenient. If one didn't do that kind of work, the other one did. Anyhow, both of them said, oh, no, I'm not doing that. There's something wrong in the lower engine. And I couldn't find a mechanic shop that would work on it because of its age. And I'm not a mechanic. And I don't pretend to be. I don't even change my own oil. So I was faced with the reality of I need to get a newer vehicle simply because nobody will work on the one I've got. I finally found a guy about 75 miles away that would work on it. I really wasn't that interested in towing it that far. That was going to be a big tow bill. to have a big repair bill. And I decided it was just cheaper to buy another car. So I did. That was a long time ago now. And by the way, I gave the truck to a friend of mine to do as he wanted with it. He was going to fix it up and drive it. He gave it to his nephew, and they fixed it up. And it took like less than $100, and it's now residing in Nevada, I believe. So
those are the stories you hate to hear.
Yeah, it was a good truck. It got like 30 miles a gallon. You know, you don't find those very often.
No, not at all. Not anymore.
No, it was an old Nissan long bed truck, and even the long beds were not that common. So for that year or that age. So anyhow, yeah, a good truck gone away, and turned out it wasn't anything major. Didn't need all this expensive work that everybody had told me it needed, and so forth and so on. And I could have cried when I heard that, but I said, well, that spilt milk. You gave it away. Just keep on going. Right? Yeah,
exactly.
That's the way it goes sometimes. And that's the disadvantage, too, not being a mechanic. But we're kind of getting off away from your project here. You know, a lot of times people forget that somebody like you who's an inventor, you've got a project on GoFundMe, you have a whole life. You know, besides cars, do you work on cars?
Yeah, I work on cars. Every now and then I'll get an older car in here and I'll restore it, and either I'll keep it or I'll sell it. I spend a lot of time with my sons. I am a stay-at-home father, homemaker, you call it, and a lot of time spent playing with the kids, mainly on their devices, and them showing me the newer games. But I try to also teach them how to work on the cars with me.
Well, that's you know, a great activity, and you know, as far as being a little bit non-traditional, there's not a bad thing either. I can remember, this is, you know, my daughter is now ever so much more than 20. I'm a grandma, actually. When she was in junior high and was taking her first shop class, and we lived in a very conservative community. Anyhow, she was challenged when they discovered that she could operate the power tools. Who taught you how to do that? And she told them, my mom. You know, they really didn't know what to think about that, because I was the one that taught her how to run things like scroll saws and jigsaws and circular saws and drills, because they were the tools that I used to keep our house from falling down, to build things that we wanted and make things that we wanted. Those are the tools that I used. I also can, you know, use a sewing machine. That's been my buddy here lately. And I tell everybody, you know, the scroll saw and the sewing machine are pretty much the same thing. They work the same way. They go up and down. One connect, you know, puts a thread in, one cuts through. Same difference outside of that.
Yeah, and I get a lot of grief from my buddies for being able to sew, but when their interior needs fixed, who do they call?
Well, a lot of famous clothing designers are male. Clothing designers need to know how to sew, too. In order to design the clothes, they've got to know how they go together. They may not be expert seamstress. They may hire people to do that, but they have to be able to do basic construction for the design as well. And, you know, I know that when I was a kid, when my dad had a car restored, and he did that often, when it went to the upholstery shop to have the new headliner, have the seats reupholstered and stuff, guess who was the guy operating the machine? Exactly. It was a guy. And those industrial machines work the same way as that Brother sewing machine I've got sitting in the other room.
They sure do.
There's not much difference. In fact, I've used treadle machines too. They work the same way as my computerized machine. It's just that you could see the belt instead of gears. It had a belt. And instead of an electric motor providing the initial power, you use your feet on this treadle, which for people who are not familiar with them, and I keep forgetting that not everybody has seen them, it was a flat panel made out of cast iron, roughly the size of a clipboard or a sheet of typing paper, and you put your feet on that. Now, when I did it, I put both feet on it, and I rocked my feet back and forth. I've read more modern descriptions of how you're supposed to do it, and they do it entirely different. They have 1 foot on it, and they push down with the toe there, and then the other one they just put the toe of their foot on and they push with that. That's probably more efficient than the way I did it with the entire foot going back and forth. I probably put a lot more effort into it. But, the machines still work pretty much the same way. In fact, I was surprised. I was surfing through something in a modern treadle machine that does zigzag and buttonholes and all the other things we expect from our modern sewing machines, but powered by treadle, is still being manufactured and sold. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Who buys them? Then I discovered that all these people who live off-grid love these machines. And I thought, well, bingo, that makes sense. No power required from your solar system. And somebody else's great idea, they modernized that old treadle machine. So, it's kind of a case of invention, going backwards.
Well, Drew, I'm kind of hoping that you might have your GoFundMe page up on your tablet device.
I can bring it up, yes.
Yeah, and folks, if you're following along with us, it's www.gofundme.com/dispatch, DISPATCH -angel, ANGEL. And while Drew's pulling that up, what I was wondering, Drew, is in the last few minutes of the show, can we go through and go down the GoFundMe page for folks that are going to be looking at it, or maybe looking at it while listening to us on a podcast after the live show is over with tonight, and let them know exactly what we're looking at in the several photographs that you've included there on the GoFundMe page, because they may not be familiar with the law enforcement equipment that is being shown there, and then why you chose those particular still photographs to illustrate what's going on with the Dispatch Angel.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem. Sounds good. Let me bring this up here.
Yeah, you have to love modern technology.
Exactly. It's fast when you don't need it to be, and slow when you need it to be fast.
And that's
images. Oh, go ahead. The images on here I put on here. It's showing basically your cop's duty belt and the position of them. And then, some of the other images are one of an officer with her gun drawn, and she looks like she's alone. The purpose of the duty belt is there, so the person looking at the page can see exactly what I am talking about by duty belt, other than the radio that the officer wears. No, go ahead.
Now, when we go down past the duty belt, then it shows the rest of the accoutrements that the officer has to hold, which include extra clips. It looks like there's a flashlight involved there. There's their walkie-talkie, their service handcuffs, probably some first aid.
A nightstick, 2 pairs of handcuffs, mace, looks like a knife. And I know a lot of local police departments around here also carry a stun gun on their belt also, which is around the size of a regular gun.
And there's a small issue with that too, Drew. We can bring the people's attention. Not all departments across the United States have the stun guns or have implemented them in the as an alternative for the use of deadly force. And that's also, not to make a political point or anything out of it, but in a lot of cases it's a fact.
Yeah, and it's sad in this modern day and age that not every police force would have that implemented into their task force. But it's a reality that the officers end up having to deal with, and with that second shooting in St. Louis, a lot of people said, well, what were they going to do? If they missed at the range that they had with the unfortunate second shooting, they were in harm's way. And, if I had to put a label on it, I'm not going to ask you to. My personal opinion of that was just a very mentally disturbed young man that needed medical and psychological help that ended up committing suicide by cop.
And I'll kind of leave that as it is. But you had shown, so you shown here there's that's pretty much like standard what they have to carry. And then you have a close up here of, your typical officer's holster, which is where you're talking about mounting the piece of electronic equipment that then goes up and through and on to where the rest of the radio equipment goes from the belt, and then that's tethered to the wire that goes along, and they almost always are carrying it up on either their right or their left shoulder.
Correct, yes. And the wires itself would just run directly to the walkie-talkie that's on the belt. They would not have to run to the mic that is on their shoulder.
And it looks like in the one case you have a picture of an officer that has a suspect subdued, and they're having to reach up with that left hand, and they're having to use that hand because their mic, in fact, doesn't look like it's keyed open, does it?
No, it is not. In that situation, luckily the suspects are on the ground, but what if you have one running and you're trying to hold a gun and call for dispatch at the same time? That's not very coordinated.
Yeah, and not everybody is lucky enough to be in a department where they have a partner in the cruiser.
Correct, yes, and a lot of times in the smaller communities, there's only one or two officers on at night, and a lot of these bad criminals or the actions that do happen at night, and it's a lot of officers are alone out there.
Yeah, I've known several people that for some reason they enjoy being out on security patrol or police patrol or whatever they're doing as a night owl. But there is that aspect of doing it by yourself, and they will be the first ones that tell you, Drew, I'm going home at the end of my shift. Somebody that's doing something isn't worth my life. And that's really what we're talking about with the dispatch angel, is giving the officers another tool to make sure when they go out, be it 4 o'clock in the morning or they actually get to kiss their kids goodbye in the afternoon, that it's giving them one more advantage and one more thing in their arsenal to make sure that they walk back through that door.
Exactly. In my product, like I said earlier, it's not just to protect the officers either. It's to protect the private citizens too from officers that maybe had a bad day or they got a chip on their shoulder for some reason, and they feel the need to show aggressive force. And like I said, this product would work both ways. It would benefit both parties in this aspect.
Well, and it benefits the public at the same time in an extra way. If something goes wrong, okay, granted there's the record of it, but if the officer is incapable of calling for backup or assistance, there can still be a private citizen in danger. Just because something has happened to the officer doesn't mean that there's only bad guys in the vicinity. This keeps an open mic, even if the officer is incapable of calling for help, where the private citizen is able to also call for help, and dispatch is aware of the fact that there is somebody else there who still needs help in addition to the officer.
That is true, yes.
It's really interesting, and I know we can't talk about the nuts and bolts of how does it work, because I have to admit, I'm curious, even though I don't know anything about the internal workings of a radio. But, it sounds so simple that they draw their mic or draw their gun and mic automatically opens. Is this going to provide a reliable and consistent open mic once, it's activated?
Yes, it should actually provide just the same amount of consistency as if you were putting your finger on the button of the radio itself. The only thing I will be concerned about in the testing phase of it is if the gun is fired, the sound of the gun itself in the proximity of the microphone, if that will affect it any. But from listening to recent dispatch calls over the internet from different officers with shots being fired, I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem as I'm thinking it's going to be.
No, speaking from a dispatch point of view, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I don't think it's going to hurt the mic to transmit that sound. As a dispatcher, I heard all sorts of sounds being transmitted, some of which were quite loud. Never an officer firing a gun, thank goodness. But, the sounds of someone racking a shotgun, all those kinds of things, those sounds do not affect the mic at all. All right, now we are nearing the end of the program. For everybody who's listening, go follow Drew on Twitter. His handle's real simple. It's at, a little at symbol, DrewGT281, and that's spelled DREW, G as in George, T as in Tom, 281. All lowercase, all in a row, no spaces or underlines or anything complicated. And that will get him on Twitter. Drew, you want to tell everybody where to find your GoFundMe page again?
Yeah, you can find my GoFundMe page. It's at www.gofundme.com/dispatch-angel.
And don't forget, that dispatch has got a capital D. That's really important.
Yes, it is case sensitive.
Yeah, unfortunately on GoFundMe, it's really specific as to whether or not it's capitalized. Not all websites are like that. And to follow you on Facebook, how will they find you there?
Just type in Dispatch Angel and you'll see me.
All right. And those are great ways to keep updated. Share the project with your friends and your neighbors on social media. We're going to be seeing more from Drew, I am sure, as he expands his efforts to get his project funded. And hopefully we can get you to come back again, Drew, and give us some updates.
Certainly. I've had a wonderful experience, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Now, with the $5,000 donation that came with a perk, how many of those with the perk are available?
I only have one available at the moment, but I would consider others.
Okay. All right. So, folks, if you want to be that first guy to get that first perk, which was 10% investment in the company, correct?
Correct.
Hey, this is your opportunity. You better get on the ball, though, because everybody has heard that they can get in at the ground level, literally, for just $5,000 and do a good deed at the same time. So that's sort of a warm, fuzzy way to get started in the business world with a relatively small investment. I mean, it's less than the price of a car, for sure. Many people spend that much, on frivolous items in a year or less. So we're not talking about a huge investment here. And, folks, you can actually support his Dispatch Angel for less than the price of a cup of coffee. $1 is the minimum donation on GoFundMe. You can donate $1 and help him move forward with his project. Donating $1 is a great way to vote with your dollars and say, oh, yeah, this is an important project. So think about doing that. Like I said, it's less than the price of coffee. In fact, I think if you go to a lot of these chains, a cup of coffee can cost you over $5, which I find a little frightening to think about. It's a sure sign of age, I'm sure. But with that, Drew, I want to thank you very much for coming on the program tonight to talk about your project. It's been a wealth of information, and like I said, we're going to be staying in touch. So you're talking to me on email, I'm sure, as well as Twitter.
Sure will.
And I hope you've had fun, too.
I sure have, and I've learned a lot. Thank you both.
Well, with that, folks, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for listening tonight, and I hope that tonight's program has brought you a little bit of illumination for your own personal journey towards truth. With that, we're out of time. Join us again next week for another voice, another story, and a whole new person to talk about it with. With that, I'm your host, Gia Scott, and good night.
Well, thank you, Gia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Portal.